thing is that authenticity will trump agreement every time. So when you're authentic, you'll be able to create a space for authenticity for others. In that possibility of creating a space for authenticity to others, it becomes really addicting, actually, to be very honest with yourself. It's so much easier than all the lying that we do. We think that lying is protecting us. It's not protect. You're going to get dismissed anyways. The fool you're pretending to be is going to be dismissed. So it doesn't really work on top of that. So when we get that being authentic opens up the space for this honest, like resonating, harmonic communication, because now we're just being human, then the possibility exists that we're able to grow at that moment.
In today's episode, our guest is Dr. Fred Moss, a renowned psychiatrist and mental health advocate. With over 40,000 patients treated and driven by a deep desire to help people be authentic and truly heard, Dr. Fred has ventured into various roles and settings as a psychiatrist over the years. His passion drives him to seek better methods for providing high-quality care with the mission to align individuals with their authentic selves. Dr. Fred's innovative approach combines his extensive experience as a keynote speaker, expert witness, podcaster, and mental health coach. Today, he'll share his insights on improving mental health care and the power of authentic self-expression. Hello, Dr. Fred. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Anisha. It's just a pleasure and an honor and privilege. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you've traveled around the world and treated over 40,000 patients. So, how have these experiences influenced your perspective on mental health?
Yeah, people tell me sometimes about what is it, who I am, and I'm like, oh, did I really? And it's like, yeah, I really did. I really have had 40,000 patients in my 44 years, 45 years plus of being in the mental health field. And I started off as a childcare worker back in the day after dropping out of college the second time, and then really just getting. My mom told me I needed to get a job, so she got me a job as a childcare worker, and when it first started, I had a certain perspective. I had already gone to a therapist as a teenager, and my mom was a social worker, and my oldest brother was a psychiatrist, and I had an idea about how psychiatry was. But when I really entered the child care facility, the Fairlawn Center up there in northwestern Detroit, to be a child care worker, a new perspective immediately landed on me of what's really going on. And granted, it was a state hospital, but there's a lot of state hospitals, and in some ways, that's the gold standard. People like to think that that's like maybe different than standard, but that's actually how psychiatry is run in this country. And one of the things I really noticed immediately was that these kids are just craving for communication. They're just craving to be connected. They're craving to have a conversation. And then I started noticing that I really loved that job because I could provide that. And in the process of attempting or being with those children to heal them, I call them children. They were only like 6 or 7 years younger than me. But the idea was that, when I connected with another person, I healed as well. There was a beautiful enlightenment, like a new freedom that took place when I was connecting to these residents of the state facility. And I thought, well, this is where the answer is. And the thing is, I went into psychiatry because I really hated psychiatry. In other words, I learned while I was at the state facility that psychiatry, and this was before some of the newer changes that have taken place in the last 40 years, that psychiatry was not really built for communication in most of the modalities and facilities. Um, that psychiatry is offered. Instead, psychiatry is already shifting towards being a doctor model, a medical model, so that like if Timmy was up too late and I called the psychiatrist, or Jimmy and Johnny got in a fight or something, then the psychiatrist would come down and interview Jimmy for 20 seconds, and then interview us for another 30 seconds, and then go in a nursing office and write something in the chart, and then we'd have to go retrieve the child and hold him down while we gave him an injection of some sort of high-powered antipsychotic, anti-anxiety cocktail. Now, don't get me wrong, that's happening to this very day, every day. I mean, it's already happened hundreds of times in this country this morning, for sure. That has happened already, for no question about it. There's no question. And, people don't know that. They don't really experience that. But that's exactly what happens in those hospitals. It's not like everybody's getting held down with a shot, but several people are getting held down all day long. And it was like, well, that's not compassionate care. There's nothing about a connection in there. So I went into psychiatry hoping that I could bring my own form of communication into being maybe an avant-garde psychiatrist. And over time, that's exactly how things went. I finished off my degree. I went back to head course, went back to school, finished off my degree, and then went to medical school, and then got my residency, and then got my fellowship in none other than child and adolescent psychiatry. And, before too long, I was having a really big practice in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was like maybe the second biggest practice in Cincinnati. And, seeing hundreds of clients, sometimes 1,000 clients a year, usually over 1,000 clients a year. And then things changed a little bit. I started to really be a communicator more than anything else. And I was no longer interested in what psychiatry had now become, which was essentially a medicating field, a pill mill, if you will. And that's how people know psychiatry now. If you ask someone what's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, almost everyone will say the same thing, which is, "Oh yeah, the
Meds.
psychiatrist." Exactly. That's how people they like. I got this one. Meds. It's like, yeah, well, that's not really what I went into the field to do. Now, over time, I've learned how to do it. I know a lot about medicine. I know a lot about at least how medicine is marketed. I know a lot about diagnoses. I've diagnosed, tens of thousands of people, but I'm not excited about diagnosing or medicating anyone. And that's what I learned the long answer to your short question is, I learned that I'm not excited. I don't think that diagnosing someone or medicating someone gets them any closer to being healed. But what does get them closer to being healed? What does bring them freedom? What does, bring them maybe a sense of uh, love or even cure, if you will, from their mental distress is a human connection. And, as my practice went on, I thought, well, I'm going to take some people off of medicine. So I started taking people off of medicine in my practice, and lo and behold, they got better, way better, so much better at times that they didn't need psychiatry anymore. And was like, wow, that seems really radical. It's like, if you think about it, that is like the least radical thing out there. I mean, the radical thing is that anyone would agree to take a bunch of pills to try to affect the way they live life. Like, that's just crazy. You wanna talk about radical? That's radical. Kicking people off of that doesn't seem like it should be radical, but it, of course, was radical. It was different than what the conventional approach was. So my practice, I decided I'm gonna go around the country and see how things go, and started getting licenses in other states and closed down my main practice, and I started traveling all over the country and lots in the Midwest, and then, telepsychiatry became a thing, and before too long, I had a license out here in California, and seeing how psychiatry is delivered in all these different um, facilities, all these different approaches. And I began to work in inpatients, outpatient, nursing homes, three-quarters houses, halfway houses, orphanages, homeless shelters, rehab centers, prisons, jails, home visits, utilization review, all those things I've had experience in. And I really got a sort of a thread about how psychiatry is delivered and what it's built on. And it is built on this idea of not, it's like no longer a talk field. It's a field where, if you want to do talking, you come to another kind of mental health worker. The reason you come to a psychiatrist is simply these days is to get diagnosed and get a med. And the problem is that these meds don't work the way that they're intended to work. They're marketed very beautifully, of course. I wish they did anything close to what they say they would do, because then I'd be happy to deliver them. But I'm not happy to deliver them because frequently they cause the symptoms that they're marketed to treat. I really mean that. I mean, if you really want to know what anxiety is, start taking an anti-anxiety agent, and in between your pills, you will feel anxious. If you really want to, in many cases, if you really want to know what depression is, start taking an antidepressant, whether or not you're depressed. And sooner or later, you will be very depressed because it depletes whatever it is that it's treating. So it offers some initial help. You get a sense of some subjective experience of improvement. And then over time, usually not so long of a time, your symptoms actually get worse. So a frequent second visit complaint is, "Doc, the medicines really helped, but I'm worse." It's like, how, what? What does that
You're
even
treating
mean?
one symptom for another.
Sometimes that's exactly what it is, and other times it's actually the same symptom getting worse. So, like an appetizer is meant to quell your appetite at the same time to create a grander appetite. And these are oftentimes what these medicines do. So, look, I don't have anything against medicines. How can I? Medicines aren't even alive. Medicines are they're things. I don't have anything against medicine. So, and I don't have anything against the pharmacological industry as well either, because I mean, they're just doing what they're doing. Some of them are great people. They're just, the people are doing their jobs and they're doing what they think they is right, and just like all of us are. And and then what's been created, however, is this idea that, if people believe and know in their heart of hearts that there's something wrong with them, then they come to a psychiatrist to get confirmed that there's something wrong with them. If they're stuck and they feel like something's wrong with them, then they come to a psychiatrist to get confirmed, like to get an emphasis, like to get it affirmed that there's something wrong with them. And, people want to know that there's something wrong with them. In fact, psychiatry is a funny subspecialty. It might be the only subspecialty where if you tell somebody there's nothing wrong with them, they get really pissed. It's funny. In other subspecialties, if a cardiologist tells you you're nothing wrong with you, you're like, yay. If an oncologist tells you there's nothing wrong with you, you're like, oh, that's awesome. If a psychiatrist tells you there's nothing wrong with them, you suck. I'm going to go next door and get somebody who really knows what they're doing.
Hey guys, I would like to take a moment to introduce you to our app, Yoga Plus. You will have access to an incredible selection of videos led by top instructors in yoga, fitness, nutrition, and so much more. Download our Yoga Plus app available on iOS and Android today.